The cold, sterile air inside the alien throne room sent a shiver down Commander Ethan Drake's spine. He had faced death before, pirates, warlords, and the endless abyss of space, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Before him sat the Zalari Queen, a towering figure with shimmering violet skin, piercing silver eyes, and a crown of bioluminescent tendrils that pulsed softly in the dim light. Around him, the Queen's court stood in eerie silence, their elongated forms draped in ceremonial robes, their eyes watching him with unreadable expressions. Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had been dragged here against his will, plucked from his ship in what he could only describe as a diplomatic abduction. And now, the Queen had just spoken words that shattered every expectation he had. "You will live with my daughter." The words echoed through the chamber, bouncing around the walls like a sentence of exile. Ethan blinked. Of all the things he expected from this alien meeting, an interrogation, imprisonment, or even execution, this wasn't one of them. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tight with disbelief. The Queen leaned forward, her silver gaze unwavering. "You heard me, human. It is my decree." Ethan stole a glance at the being standing just behind the Queen, her daughter. She was smaller than the other Zalari, but still taller than any human woman. Her smooth violet skin glowed faintly under the biolights of the palace. Unlike her mother, whose presence radiated authority, the princess looked indifferent, almost bored. Her silver eyes flicked to him for a mere second before she turned away as if the entire situation was beneath her concern. Ethan exhaled sharply. "And if I refuse?" A ripple of tension spread through the court. The guards flanking the Queen tensed, gripping their weapons, but the Queen simply smirked. "Refusal is not an option." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Why? Why do you want a human, me, living with your daughter?" The Queen's tendrils shimmered, shifting in a way that made it impossible to tell if she was amused or irritated. "Because I command it." That wasn't an answer. Ethan had spent years navigating fragile peace treaties between alien factions, and he knew when rulers were withholding information. There was something more to this. His mind raced with possibilities. Was he a hostage? A diplomatic experiment? A test subject? The Queen gestured, and two guards stepped forward. Their glowing staffs hummed ominously. A warning. Ethan sighed. It wasn't like he had a choice. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll play along." The Queen's lips curled into something that almost resembled a smile. "Good." The princess, however, didn't react at all. An hour later, Ethan found himself in an opulent alien residence that made even the most extravagant human palaces look modest. The ceilings stretched impossibly high, curving in organic, sweeping designs, illuminated by floating orbs of shifting colors. The walls were made of some sort of iridescent stone, pulsing gently, as if the very structure was alive. And yet, despite its breathtaking beauty, Ethan felt more trapped than ever. Across the large chamber, the Zalari princess stood with her arms crossed, staring at him with cool indifference. "I don't see why this is necessary," she said flatly. "I don't need a human." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Glad to know the feeling's mutual. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly, studying him like an insect under a microscope. "My mother believes your kind has potential," she said, her voice carrying the faintest trace of disdain. "She thinks you will teach me something." Ethan smirked. "And what exactly am I supposed to teach you?" The princess exhaled through her nose, as if this whole situation was an inconvenience. "That is the mystery." Ethan folded his arms. "Well, Your Highness, if you want to make this easy, I say we stay out of each other's way. You do your thing, I do mine, and we pretend we are fulfilling whatever weird decree your mother cooked up." The princess studied him for a long moment, then, surprisingly, nodded. "That is acceptable." Ethan was relieved. If he had to be stuck here, the last thing he wanted was a royal babysitting job. Days passed in awkward, forced cohabitation. The princess, who finally introduced herself as Ceres, seemed entirely uninterested in interacting with him. She spent most of her time in the palace's private observatory, watching distant nebulae swirl through the cosmos. Ethan, on the other hand, explored his surroundings cautiously, getting a feel for the layout of his new gilded prison. The Queen hadn't given him rules, but he knew better than to assume he had free rein. He was being watched. One night, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered through the halls and found Ceres standing on the balcony, staring up at the stars. He hesitated. Then, for some reason, he spoke. "You miss something, don't you?" Ceres stiffened. "What?" Ethan stepped closer, leaning on the railing. "You stand here every night, staring up. That's not boredom. That's longing." She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. "You assume too much, human." Ethan smirked. "Maybe." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the palace's energy field. Then, unexpectedly, Ceres turned to him. "What do humans do when they miss something?" The question caught him off guard. He studied her, wondering if this was a trap. But there was no mockery in her expression. Only curiosity. Ethan exhaled. "Depends. Some people distract themselves. Others chase whatever they lost." Ceres considered this. Then, very softly, she said, "And if what was lost cannot be found?" Ethan met her gaze. "Then you carry it with you." For the first time since they had met, Ceres seemed to really look at him. A flicker of something crossed her features. Understanding? Recognition? Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan alone under the alien stars. And for the first time since arriving, he realized something. Maybe this arrangement wasn't as pointless as he thought. Ethan stood on the balcony long after Ceres had left, staring at the vast cosmos stretched before him. The stars here looked different, larger, brighter, almost alive. The alien sky held mysteries he hadn't begun to understand. And now, somehow, he was part of one. He exhaled, shaking his head. Just a few days ago, he was the commander of his own fate. Now, he was a reluctant guest, or perhaps a prisoner, ordered to live with an alien princess for reasons he still didn't fully grasp. And yet, something had shifted tonight. Ceres had asked a real question. And for the first time, she had actually listened to his answer. The next morning, something strange happened. Ceres was waiting for him. Ethan nearly stopped in his tracks when he saw her standing near the entrance to the palace courtyard, arms folded, her silver eyes unreadable. "Come with me," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "No, stay out of my way today." Ceres didn't react to the jab. "I want to see how humans live." Ethan blinked. "Wait, what?" "I have studied your kind through records and reports," she continued, ignoring his confusion. "But I have never seen a human's world. And since I am forced to keep you here, I would rather not waste my time." Ethan smirked. "So now I'm your personal guide to humanity. Unless you prefer I learn from another." Ethan sighed. "Fine. What do you want to know?" Ceres hesitated. Then, surprisingly, she said, "Everything." Their days slowly shifted from cold avoidance to something else, learning, questioning, and, at times, arguing. Ceres was unlike anyone Ethan had ever met, sharp, logical, impossibly intelligent, and entirely unafraid to challenge his every word. "How can you trust a species that fights itself?" she asked one day, after learning about Earth's history of war. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Because we also build, love, and protect. Conflict doesn't define us, how we rise from it does." Ceres studied him, as if weighing his words. "That is an optimistic perspective. It's a human one." Other times, the questions were simpler. "What is laughter?" she asked. Ethan almost choked on his drink. "You're joking, right?" Ceres tilted her head. I do not joke. He stared at her, then suddenly let out a short, amused chuckle. That right there. That was a joke. Ceres frowned. I did not intend humor. That's what makes it funny. She muttered something in her own language, clearly unimpressed. But later that evening, when she watched a recording of human comedians for the first time, Ethan swore he saw her lips twitch. Almost a smile. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan and Ceres were no longer strangers. He saw it in the way she no longer dismissed his words, the way her silver eyes didn't just look at him, but searched for meaning in what he said. And Ceres? She, too, was changing. For the first time in her life, she was no longer simply a princess of the Zalari, she was someone asking questions for herself. And then, the queen summoned them again. The throne room was just as imposing as before, but this time, Ethan didn't feel like a prisoner. The queen's silver gaze swept over both of them before she spoke. You have changed, she said to Ceres. Both of you. Ethan wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Ceres, however, lifted her chin. I have learned what you wished me to learn. The queen studied her daughter. And what have you discovered? Ceres glanced at Ethan before answering. That humans are not weak, she said. They are chaotic, stubborn, and reckless. But they are also resilient. The queen's bioluminescent tendrils flickered in interest. And what have you learned of yourself? Ceres hesitated. Ethan saw her fingers tighten at her sides. That I do not wish to be told how to understand the universe, she finally said. I wish to discover it for myself. A ripple of murmurs spread through the court. The queen was silent for a long moment. Then, she smiled. Then the experiment is complete, she said. Ethan frowned. Wait. Experiment. The queen turned to him, her expression unreadable. You misunderstand, human. This was never about you. It was always about her. Ceres stiffened. You were testing me. The queen nodded. I wished to see if a life of rigid duty had robbed you of curiosity. If you would refuse to learn from one so different. You have answered that question. Ceres's hands curled into fists. And if I had refused? The queen's smile faded. Then you would have never been worthy of ruling. Ethan exhaled. So that was it. This entire arrangement, his forced stay, the time spent with Ceres, it had all been a test. A test Ceres had unknowingly passed. But Ceres didn't look triumphant. She looked betrayed. You manipulated me, she said coldly. The queen's gaze didn't waver. I guided you. Ceres stepped back. Ethan could see the storm brewing behind her silver eyes. But when she turned, she didn't look at her mother. She looked at him. That night, Ceres stood on the balcony again, just like she had weeks ago. Ethan stood beside her, knowing he didn't have to say anything. Finally, she spoke. You should leave. Ethan's jaw tightened. Is that what you want? Ceres hesitated. No, she admitted. But it is what I must say. Ethan nodded slowly. So this is goodbye. Ceres glanced at him. For now. There was something in her tone. A promise. Ethan smirked. Guess I should feel honored. Most humans don't get to say they were roommates with an alien princess. Ceres rolled her eyes. Most humans do not test my patience as much as you. Ethan chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. A pause. Then, Ceres did something unexpected. She reached forward and placed 2 fingers against his forehead. A Zalari gesture. A bond, an acknowledgement, a silent farewell. Ethan's heart pounded as he met her gaze. Don't get too comfortable on this planet, Ceres said. One day, I will come find you. Ethan grinned. I'll be waiting. The stars shimmered above them, endless and vast. And as Ethan walked away, he knew that somewhere in the galaxy, Ceres would be looking for answers, just as he would be. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.